How about you? Today we're going to be talking about the bush hog. We're going to give a real basic overview of the components and how it works, and then show you a little bit about how we use it here at the Hamiltonville farm. Let's go outside and get started. Today we're going to talk about the bush hog, kind of some of the basic overview stuff and some of the specifications of them and things like that. But man, I had to put a jacket on coming outside. I did the intro inside and I walked outside, and I'm telling you, this weather's crazy. It dropped from 70 to 55 like it saw a state trooper, man, and it's crazy. Yesterday I had shorts and t-shirts on, and today I've got a jacket and jeans on. So anyway, you never know what it's going to do here in the Panhandle of Florida. We have winter, summer, spring all in like a span of 3 days, and then finally we'll stay summer for the next 11 months. So but anyway, hey, we're going to talk about the bush hog. If we've never met before, I'm Hank. My wife Gina and I run a 75-acre hobby farm. We're beginners, and so we're just trying to learn as we go, and we're glad you decided to stop by and check us out. So let's dive into this bush hog, and let's talk about some of the safety aspects of it. Let's talk about some of the things that went into my decision making on what bush hog I was going to buy. And you're going to want to watch the whole thing because I cover some of these areas in detail, and hopefully it will help you make a decision, or hopefully it will help you become a better operator on your bush hog. All right, let's get started. Before I hook my bush hog up to my tractor, I position the tractor in front of it. Then I actually get off of it, stop the engine, set the parking brake, and then come back here and do a visual inspection on the bush hog itself. And so why I think this is important is because you never know what kind of animals or what, you know, you may have some kittens that crawl under here, some chickens or something, you know. So you always have to be kind of mindful of what's going on underneath the bush hog, because a lot of times things find homes underneath bush hogs. And as you can see, I've actually got mine sitting on some skids. I've seen people put them on all kind of things, but you know, keeping it off the ground is important. You also want to kind of look under there, not only for animals and things like that, but you want to look under there so that you can check the blades, make sure the blades aren't kind of wrapped around each other. Now, before I actually hook it up again, not only do I do a visual inspection of the bush hog itself, you know, to make sure like the cantilever and the yoke back here are pretty good with the rear tire. Make sure all the bolts are tight and things like that. Now, you have different type of configurations. You have some that have mulch kits on them, some that have, you know, solid cantilevers and things like that for the rear tire. So depending on the style of bush hog you buy, that will determine what kind of setup you get. Now that I got the visual inspection done underneath, I forgot to mention earlier, be careful because there might be snakes under there depending on how you store it, right? So just be real careful when you look under there. Now I can look at the top part of the bush hog. This is the gearbox that actually runs from the PTO shaft and turns the blades underneath it. So there's some things that you have to be considerate of. One is you need to make sure it's full of fluid. You fill it through this top hole, but how do you, like if you're going to go buy a used one, how do you know if it's full of, how do you know if it has fluid in it? Well, you have a view window underneath, and you just simply crank that screw there until some oil, some fluid, hydraulic fluid drips out of it, gearbox oil, whatever you want to call it, falls out of it, and then tighten it back up. Now, if it's on level ground, it'll give you a good indication of how full it is. So you just double check to make sure that it's got fluid in it, especially if you're going to go buy a used one off of some old guy's farm or something like that. It's been sitting a while. So just double check that. Also, inside here is your shear bolt, all right? Shear pin, shear bolt, whatever the case may be. So you need to keep 5, 6, 7 of these things handy because what they're designed to do is they're designed to actually break from the PTO if you apply too much torque, and it protects the gearbox. And so instead of breaking your gears, it breaks that pin, and that protects your bush hog and the gearbox associated with it. There's also inside of here, there's a grease fitting or a zerk fitting. That's where you lube this CV joint up. All bush hogs come with, or unless you're buying an old used one somewhere, this protective PTO sleeve around the PTO shaft. And it also has a chain on it. Now this chain connects to the bracket here, and it keeps the PTO sleeve or shaft cover from spinning. And you have one up front as well, and that hooks up to your tractor and keeps the front part from spinning. All right, so let's actually hook the tractor up to the bush hog. All right, as you hook the PTO shaft up, you want to make sure that you do it, the PTO has splines on it, so you're going to line the splines up with your PTO shaft. Now this shaft extends in and out. The shaft extends in and out so that it reaches to your PTO shaft. All right, and so, or your PTO output. What exactly is a PTO? PTO is power takeoff, and so what that simply means in general layman's terms is that it takes off power from the tractor and distributes it to an implement that cannot create its own power. So that's simply what it means by power takeoff. And each implement is designed for a certain RPM, all right? And so I'll show you in a second. Some tachometers have a little yellow indicator with a little gearbox on it that tells you what speed to turn the PTO at so that it turns the implement at the proper speed. 540 is the RPMs that you're going to want. So I'll show you that on the tachometer in a second. But when you hook this thing up, there's certain little ways you can hook it. Some have a collar, but this one has a button that you push on the sleeve. So this one has a button, and as I push this button, this will allow me, can you see the indentation on the spline of the PTO shaft here? That button will allow this shaft to lock onto this PTO output shaft. Again, some will have a collar that you slide back on, some have buttons, but the intent is to keep it securely placed on the PTO output shaft. Okay, so let's hook it up. All right, you can see my PTO output shaft cover has a little indentation that I can put the chain on. Just simply wrap the chain around the top link. I've seen people use chain top links. Not sure I recommend that. Doesn't seem very safe to me, but hey, whatever floats your boat, right? Anyway, now that I got it hooked up, let's talk about some considerations as we pull this thing out of the stall. So there's a few things to consider when you actually get the bush hog connected to your tractor. One is your tractor is going to turn different. So your turning radius, and the tractor's not going to turn different per se. It's just that you're going to have to be really cognizant of the fact that you've got this piece of equipment that's extending 8, 10, 12 feet behind you, because now your tractor is going to turn as a whole unit. It's not going to articulate in the back. Look at me with the big word. It's not going to articulate in the back, so not like a tractor trailer, if you will. That whole thing's going to turn, so you're going to make sure your clearance in the back is enough to accommodate the bush hog. And another thing you have to think about is, what size bush hog do I need? Well, what you need and what your tractor can handle are two different things, right? You always need bigger, but what your tractor can handle, every 5 horsepower, it can handle 1 foot of bush hog. And what I mean by that is, if you have a 5 foot wide bush hog then a 25 horsepower engine on your tractor can accommodate that. And let's see, that 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, yeah, I did my math right? So anyway, hey, so mine is a 6 foot, so I have to have a 30 horsepower or bigger tractor to accommodate a 6 foot wide bush hog. And so my tractor is 41 horsepower, so it pulls this thing pretty easy. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit about, as we mentioned earlier in the video, we talked about this PTO, some more safety features because I think it's important. I'm going to show you how this PTO sleeve works, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Stumpjumper. So let me show you a little bit about that. See how the CV joint is turning, and you can see that shear bolt moving around. And if you look inside that inspection hole, inside the bush hog itself, you can see the blades turning. You can see how the sleeve is not turning, and this chains keep the sleeve in place. And I mentioned the term Stumpjumper earlier. A Stumpjumper is designed to jump stumps, right? And so as you can see behind me, we've cleared out some pine trees here. So let's take a look at some of this stuff here. I have tons of these stumps that are anywhere between 2 to 6 inches off the ground. And so what my plan is going to be is start with my bush hog pretty high off the ground, kind of skim the top, and then that way I can identify where these stumps are, and then I'll work my way down. But identifying where stumps are is not the only thing you need to do. What else you need to do is you need to walk the terrain before you bush hog the area. Why do I gotta walk it, especially if it's a 200-acre field, right? Well, let me tell you why you need to walk it. Because you don't want to be on your tractor, cruising along, got your Elvis playing in your Bluetooth headphones, cruising along and run over a bee's nest. Because they're not going to get you on the first pass, but by God, when you come around on that second time, you're going to get lit up, all right? So you want to look for things like big potholes, rocks, stumps that are too big for your tractor to go over, bees nests that are in the ground, yellow jackets or wasp or whatever the case may be. So those things, man, you need to make sure that you pay attention to that before you actually go cut what you're going to cut. I had mentioned earlier in the video about the PTO Speed being 540. Well, most tachometers on new tractors have this symbol right here. It's a little yellow symbol with a gearbox on it. That's where I want my orange needle to go to equate to 540 RPMs, that turns out, because the differential is going to turn. Now that the basic overview of the bush hog is complete, let's see this thing in action, right? But how do you actually get it to operate? How do you get it to turn on, right? Well, you've got to engage the PTO. That's what powers the blades to spin. And we talked about the icon and the RPMs that was associated with it. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to start the tractor and automatically rev it up to 540 RPMs, PTO RPMs. You don't want to rev it up to that little yellow icon, right, which is 2,000, 2,100 RPMs on my tractor. What you want to do is when you start your tractor, go ahead and ease the throttle back to about 1,000, 1,500 RPM, somewhere around in there, it doesn't matter. So then you can engage the PTO, let your or however your tractor engages the PTO, I let my clutch off. And so it eases that PTO shaft into action, all right? So it doesn't break all that torque, all that immediate torque doesn't break that shear pin, all right? So my technique, I start at about 1,000, 1,500 RPMs, engage the PTO, ease off the clutch, and then I slowly bring those RPMs up to the icon that we pointed out earlier, all right? So let's get this thing going. So you saw the example of how the bush hog is used. You know, depending on the terrain that you use, they come in here and they harvested pines off this property. And so I'm constantly looking for, you know, sticks like this, or I got some stumps that I had to look over and all that. So it's pretty nasty up in here. So I had to make sure that my speed was appropriate for the terrain that I was cutting. And so if you're cutting an open field or a pasture or something like that that's pretty smooth, I don't see why you couldn't go into third or fourth gear, whatever your tractor can handle, maintaining those PTO RPMs. But for this type of bumpy terrain, I'm constantly raising and lowering the bush hog. Then, you know, I need to go slow so I can pay attention. You need to keep your head on a swivel so you can look in front of you for stumps, tree limbs, whatever the case may be. Look behind you to make sure that the bush hog is still intact and the components are working like they're supposed to be working. So it's just so important that you pay attention to the safety aspect of operating a piece of machinery like this. Pay attention to your operator's manual. Make sure that you maintain the equipment so that it's in good operating condition. All those things will help you have a safe operation of the bush hog. And so, you know, if you're going to be operating it day in and day out, just make sure you don't get lackadaisical. Can I say that word? Just make sure you don't get complacent with the bush hog, and understand that you still need to maintain the safety regulations and safety aspects of operating the bush hog. And with that being said, you know, that kind of covers our basic overview of the implements that I have for the hobby farm, and this video was focused on the bush hog. And so we appreciate you watching. As always, there's going to be a picture of the barn pop up here. We'd love for you to click on it, kind of subscribe to our channel, and give us a big thumbs up if you like what you saw. Also, share this video with your friends. We would appreciate that. All our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Hamiltonville Farm. We'd appreciate you go check us out there. All right, you guys take care, and we'll catch you on the next video.